So, James, just to give you the end result. Again, I'm not expecting you guys to do this, but this is something that I'll be doing with you. So the geometry for the banner is still just a basic plane that I did a little deformation using an FFD on. But then using an actual texture map, that's going to control my silhouette. So it looks ragged, it looks, torn. I'm not going to keep this opacity, but it looks ragged, torn, but it's not being driven by geometry. It's being driven by a texture. We're using the completed unwrap from week 3. So week 3 we started unwrapping, and I did the entire unwrap process just so that we're all on the same page this week. We're all going to share a finished version of that unwrap. So when I start doing something in this area, rather than someone having their shells all over the place or different formations. No worries. And now you can compare what you did in class to a unwrap for the wild goose. Actually, speaking of unwraps, sorry, no, do grab it. But we're gonna work with that unwrap complete in class. But you can take that completed file, compare it to your file from last week, and see what the differences are. Is one area more distorted? No, of the wild goose. The car, yeah. Yeah. No worries. No, it's coming back today. Actually, just to reply to Sarah Flo inside the Twitch chat, asked the same thing. When will our A-Wing marks come back? And I responded with today. My apologies about that. And actually, it's a good segue to what I wanted to mention at the start of class. I've been trying to eat healthier for the past few days, and my stomach is not having it. So my apologies. My apologies in advance if I have to jump. Well, changing gears suddenly, your body just goes, ah! It will eventually. Ellis, what's... was it Alyssa or Carrington who started talking and then got stepped on? They had a question. Yes. No. No, I always explain the marks you get. Although, in advance, I'll apologize because I'm limited to 4 minutes with those audio clips. But I can definitely say more in 4 minutes than I can type in 4 minutes. So... Well, there's a big difference there between what you guys are actually submitting and what's being graded, because most of the time digital drawing can be done from an image, whereas I have to actually dig around in your files and your models and your unwraps to find what you did right, what you did wrong. Good segue. No. It's practice. Making it into a linear unwrap. You could. That's valid. As long as you remove the distortion from the linear unwrap, then yeah, it works. Yep. So there's a bunch of different ways to unwrap this shell. The one that I sort of pointed you guys to was cutting these corners either on this edge or this one. So if those edges got cut, sorry, broken, and I'm just going to isolate to a single engine. Those get cut. You can right away start with a quick peel just to see what kind of result it's going to give you. It helps if I actually break all the edges. Yep. No worries. So this is with the front section, bottom section split off. So flat edge or flat series of polygons, linear polygons versus the curved polygons. So this is the bottom section, which you can see I've got pretty close to perfect squares on it. The only thing that I would have to do more to this would be to get the entire shell aligned to either X, Y, or Z. So, yep. So these back UVs, just get them linear with an aligned vertical to pivot, pin them in place, and then peel it. Just because, again, it's going to make the life of your texturing artist a lot easier if it's actually straight rather than having to repeatedly paint in curves. With this method, with the top shell, since it's curved, you're not going to be able to get rid of all of the distortion on it. The only thing that you can really do to make people's lives easier is if there is a piece or an element that needs to transition across these small polygons, you could potentially set the back or the front to linear, but because of that curvature, there's a little indentation towards the front of the ship. Don't strain both of them, because those edges are measurably different. Like, it even impacts the silhouette. So rather than setting the back line to be straight, since these small polygons are basically just loops, set those to linear, and then pin them and peel. So that's one option. Again, you're not going to get rid of all of your distortion, but it is going to minimize it. If you did do the unfold from strip, oops. So picking an edge, most people went with the bisecting edge, or most people who did this went with the bisecting edge, which works. Yeah, I used it on the engine cylinders. I did one as a cylindrical unwrap and then unrolled it, and then I did another as the unfold from strip. And that's what you were supposed to do. So unfold from strip will give you a fairly decent result, but anytime you use automation, and that's any automated process, mesh smooth, flatten unwrap, unfold from strip, always go through and double check what Max gives you, because it's only functioning based on an algorithm. It's not taking into account best practices or what's going to help you texture. So just go through, double check your distortion on things. So like right now, you can see I've got a bit of distortion on the front. It's actually not too bad, but some polygons still need to be adjusted, especially the back. But it's workable. It's definitely a result that can be worked with. And obviously this is going to be a lot easier to work with if you're bringing in like a photo texture, if you're basing your texture off of photographs, or an image-based texture, I should say. So this works too. Again, it's curved. It's not going to have zero distortion unless you slice it to hell. If you slice it to hell, that just means that, yeah, you're distortion free or low no distortion, but then you're going to have to spend extra time fixing all of your texture seams due to the broken edges. Oops, take off rotate. So same object, same pieces of geometry, different approaches to the unwrap. This is going to be difficult to work with if you're using a image-based texture. So if you're grabbing something from textures.com, later on, what I'll be showing you guys, we won't need to use it inside of Texture 1, but I'm sure you guys have already heard of the term procedural generation, right? Please? Okay. So, that's one of the sort of pivot points that Substance uses. Max has it too, but it's nowhere near as handy. Maps General, that's the one. Go. So this would be a procedural map where, long story short, I won't go into full theory of what it is, but it's basically just texturing something using a algorithm. So in this case, it's a noise algorithm to generate or transition between 100% black to 100% white. So if I increase my scale, drop my high and low values to give a little bit more contrast. If you're doing, or if you wanted to start doing like a pitted texture on a surface, using a procedural is going to let you get to a workable state a lot faster. It doesn't do the work for you, quite the contrary. It kind of makes you or forces you to have to do the work that's going to make it look better than what the algorithm gave you. But working with a procedural texture like this lower guy, or the lower engine unwrap, straight, is going to be a little easier to work with because all of the edges are straight across. You're not going to have a texture seam from one side to the other. So if I move this guy down, so that's sitting on the border of 1-1. Not that you would do this, but for demonstration's sake. Nope. You can line it up so that there's no seam there whatsoever. Now this is using object coordinates as opposed to UV coordinates, so it's a little different. But yeah, there's going to be different time, or depending on what you're unwrapping, you're going to need to unwrap it differently, depending on what the object is and what the texture is that needs to be applied to it is. And I'll be showing you guys examples of that as we go. So I'm just going to really quickly go through the unwrap process on this guy. I'm going to be going closer to my full speed. This isn't a follow along, this is just watch. This is to refresh or reinforce what I've already shown you. So I'm going to start with a new planar projection because you guys are going to have to unwrap this next assignment, the F-Zero or the Blue Falcon, on your own. So I won't be giving you guys hints. But even if the model changes, the theory never does. So Apologies is asking, is it bad if we separate the inner and outer loop? The inner versus the outer side of the back engine? No. As long as your distortion was minimized, again, it's curved, so you're not going to get rid of all of it. That's fine. And extra points if you ended up stacking them. Not the top and bottom, or the top and inner, but the upper engine and then the lower engine, because probably a safe assumption that they're going to be taking the same texture. So on the rear engines and the rear tail fin, you could symmetry left to right, so symmetry on the x-axis. With those central engines in the back, it's symmetrical top and bottom. So you'd unwrap one, pack all of your shells into 1-1 UV space, and then you would take that unwrapped engine, detach, run symmetry on axis of Y, reattach them back together. So as always, I start with a planar projection. Different people do it differently. For example, I know that Jeremy really prefers to do a flattened map. Sorry, depending on what he's doing. Hard surfaces, he does a flattened map. Characters, he does a normal map, or a facing map. I think Anson does a variation of this as well. I start with just a planar projection to get everything into single shells, get my overall proportions correct right from the get-go. And then I just start moving stuff out of 1-1 UV space. Nothing enters 1-1 UV until I know that's unwrapped. So I'll go in the same order. On the back, try and find a series of polygons that has good squares to begin with. So I don't have full squares visible on this polygon. there's no way for me to assess whether or not it has distortion. So going to the tiling options, popping it or bumping it up, that lets me see that these guys are pretty much stable, so I don't want anything happening to them. Convert selection to verts and pin. Actually, they're slightly stretched, so I'm just going to give them a little bit of a bump down. So I know this polygon's good. If I tell Max these polygons are good, start working with the unwrap to fix the rest of them, i.e. quick peel. The sides get better, so they're no longer these horrendous smears. They're not squares, they're quadrilaterals. I don't think that's the correct geometry, but bear with me. That got a lot better because as a result of the planar projection, these polygons were stacked on top of one another, so they had no actual surface area to them. I need to be able to adjust this polygon without affecting this one, and I need to be able to affect this one without affecting this one. The only way you're going to do that is by breaking them apart, so that when you run quick peel, what's done to this doesn't affect this. So I click it, peel it, good squares, good squares. I don't have full squares to assess this area, so dialing my tiling up even more. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I can tell that there's no distortion on it. There are other methods for detecting distortion. They're not, I don't find them to be particularly reliable. I do point to them in that week 2 write-up, stitching and breaking. There's angle distortion and area distortion. I don't find these to be reliable. I find it's a dangerous tendency to start chasing colors rather than looking at what's actually happening to a texture on it. So you'll never see me use these. They're there, they do what they say they do, but this is always going to be the most reliable, in my opinion. On the interior, I've got the same situation. I need to adjust this without affecting this. So I break them, peel them. So squares, squares, and squares. With the main tail fin, or the tail fin, it's basically a plane. So rather than trying to run a quick peel, I can get to a good or a stable state just by rerunning the projection on it. So planar projection, immediately followed by fit and center. Get it to the right axes. So Z, Y, garbage, garbage, X, there she is. I don't need my tiling that high anymore, so I'll dial it back down. While I still have the planar projection up, that means I can quickly go through and make a scaling adjustment to get my squares in. If I keep these as is, they're already perfectly stacked in the UV editor, so I could potentially leave them. I just need to adjust or account for this strip of polygons in the back. I don't have a bisecting line on it, however. There's no edge that splits the tail fin completely in half, so I can't run a symmetry with it. If I ran a symmetry, I'd be adding in a new edge, and I'd potentially be messing up the model sheet that the person was working with, or whatever. You never want to actually change the mesh when you're doing the unwrap, unless you're explicitly told you can. Pro tip: you're not allowed to change the mesh inside texture in 1. That's something that you guys have to do in 2nd year. So I've got that back series of polygons selected. I could, by all means, run another planar, get it to the right axes, It won't cause any problems for the UVs themselves. It does make your job easier. But if you're in a environment where multiple people are handling assets, you don't want to be adding or removing geometry. Not just familiarity, but if someone's basing something, so like a smart texture or smart material or a generator based off the geometry that's currently there, you could potentially cause a cascade issue and screw up someone else's work. In something this simple, it's not likely to happen, but later on when you're doing like characters, costume, full set dressing, that sort of thing, it can mess things up quite quickly. You kind of need to anticipate or be told in advance, this is how it's going to be unwrapped. Okay, I'll be able to do this with it. Whereas if you're running symmetry and splice or cutting mesh in half, certain options get changed. So by all means, could run a planar projection on this. Again, I'm looking for nice perfect squares, which I have. Or I could just as easily, while it was still combined or before it was broken off. So this is immediately after the planar projection on the x-axis. I can turn on detach inside of quick peel or the peel command, hit it. So it will break off or break the shell that I have selected off of what's currently in scene or what it's currently attached to. So now those three polygons are on their own. The only thing I'd want to make sure of at this point is to set it up so that it's aligned with either X or Y axes, which just means taking one edge, making it straight, telling Max that's the one edge that I don't want it messing with, and then hitting peel, just to get it completely upright. So that if I have linear information or linear sections of the texture, seams for structural seams or mechanical seams running across it vertically, they're going to be as crisp as they can be. So there's my two pieces. Sorry, I'm just moving this out from underneath the preamble because I didn't switch it off. The only thing to be careful of in this situation when you're stacking shells, and I didn't mark you guys down for this, but I did make mention of it in your feedback. Sorry, will be making mention of it when you get your feedback. There is a limiting factor or a limitation that comes with keeping shells rather stacked with this, and I'm hoping that you guys experience this while you're unwrapping the A-wing. If I were to apply a texture that has distinct left-right information, so typically that means text, or the simplistic example of that is text. Sorry, got this backwards. So I'll just type hello, make it white. And that's my awesome diffuse. Yeah. If I now assign that texture to the tail fin, started on the wrong side. So there's my hello. Looks fine. As soon as I rotate to the other side though, the text is backwards. It's because you have two shells stacked over top of one another and one of them is flipped inside out. So if a surface has text on it or strong directional information, stacking shells doesn't work. They would actually need to be separated. So split, mirror, and you would not want to have your shells stacked like this for a number of reasons, one of which I'll show you next week. But I'm sure you guys can already anticipate some of the issues. If I have a brush stroke that goes that falls from the front to the back, it's going to rise on the other side. So anytime you have text, it's usually a lot better to not have the shells stacked on top of one another. So those pieces are done, get packed into 1-1. Yes, exactly. And you can always just copy and once you have the texture for one side done, you can always copy and paste it over to the other side. It's slightly harder to do that inside a Substance. So typically you would just do it inside of Photoshop, or there's other ways that you can set it up. But even with a 3D Paint alternative, you're still going to be spending time in Photoshop. So with the main engine, grabbing the pole vertice on each side, convert selection to polygons, planar. Find your axes, fit center, just to get your gizmo centered on your selection. I've got squares. If you wanted to, you could absolutely stack these, assuming that they're going to be the exact same texture or they need to have the exact same appearance. So convert to verts, snaps on. Pop over, and then get these guys to perfectly overlap by using a line horizontally to pivot followed by a line vertically to pivot. That's why I have them set to hotkeys, so I can just press Alt Q, Control Q. I'm done. For the main body of the engine, by all means, start with a cylindrical projection, find the correct axes, fit center, make sure that you don't have a flyaway polygon on it. So for whatever reason, Max will occasionally, let's see if I can get it to do it. Come on, break, damn you. Correct. Demo. Yeah. So sometimes you'll get a polygon that flies off. I'll just make Max do it. So break. You'll have a polygon over on the side here, even though this is the full complete shell. All you need to do in that situation is, with your cylindrical gizmo, give it just a slight little nudge to get that polygon to snap over to the correct side. Speaking of 3CO Max and doing things, or 3CO Max doing things rather, this looks correct. This looks like a good starting point for me, but as soon as I turn off cylindrical projection, you'll notice that one of my polygons, or one of my polygon strips, or rows rather, has disappeared. If I double click the shell, it looks like everything's selected. But if I'm watching in 3D while I work, which you always should be, You'll notice that these polygons weren't added. I don't know exactly what the sequence of events is that creates this bug. I'm pretty sure I first saw it in Max 2020, and obviously it's still existing in 2021. It's just a small graphical glitch. Max hasn't broken anything. It's not, distorting anything. Just for whatever reason, while you're running cylindrical projection in isolation, occasionally, and I'm not sure if that's even the string of events that needs to happen. So I'm not sure of the reproduction steps for the bug. But all you need to do is turn off isolation, reselect your shell, isolate again, and it's fixed. It's annoying. It's not work breaking. Remember to keep your green UV shells or your green UV border edges on the exterior of your object, or on the exterior of the shell. For now, there are definitely occasions where this isn't true, but protection 1, all of your UV shells should be trimmed or outlined in green. So up here, I've got green edge on the interior. Down here, I've already started moving the edge to get it to stop overlapping. So as I move it down, the squares are going to become terrible until I keep going. That's correct. These guys are still broken. They're still completely flat 50% gray. I know these guys are good, so I'll move these guys down. And there's the start of my squares. Again, need to dial up my tiling substantially to see what I'm actually doing. So move it out. Just looking in a single corner for squares. Don't worry about this little stripe or this line of distortion that goes from corner to corner. That's a result of triangulation. So remember, graphics engines, Max, Maya, Blender, Unreal, Frostbite, Unity, they're always interpreting mesh as triangles. But for us as modeling / texturing artists, it's a lot harder to work with mesh commands aligned or specifically for triangles as opposed to working with quads. So that's why we use edit poly as opposed to edit mesh. Apologies is asking, is that Z fighting on the south face? This guy? It's from the broken edge of the cylindrical projection. So when cylindrical projection runs, it's going to correctly cut from one border edge to the other. It needs to happen, otherwise it's impossible to unwrap the cylinder. But for whatever reason, in order for it to run cylindrical projection, it ends up cutting just one set of edges all the way across, touching that border edge. So you can see green, 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 green. And here it is right here. This is a polygon that you're seeing as Z fighting. It's because one set of vertices has actually overlapped one another. So fixing it is pretty easy, rather. I know that this edge is where it's supposed to be. So rather than going right click, stitch selected, and now it's no longer where it should be. It is stitched together, but its position has changed. Inside the stitch menu, stitch to target is going to stitch what you have selected to its sister. Remember that the sister will turn blue as soon as you have a selection. Stitch to average, correct. Apologies, already guessed it. Stitch to average is going to do the same thing as right click stitch. Stitch to source will move the sister to your selection. With these guys, they're just overlapped. They're not actually moved, so I can click one, right click stitch, click selected. Rather than traveling all the way down to stitch selected again, I'll just go to the lower left quad menu blue box, click it to repeat the last command used from the lower left quad menu. So that's an option. Obviously, I would have to do the unroll process for the other side of the engine as well. Or you could select the entire edge loop, front to back, unfold strip from loop. It's going to give me a really big shell, so select it, hit pack normalize to just automatically move it to 1-1. And I'll just take down my tiling at this point. So it gives me a linear result, which again means that you can work with images a lot easier, or image-based textures. Just make sure that you go through and you adjust the edges. So for whatever reason, it caused this top border edge to be crooked. Select it, align horizontally to pivot, done. So if you actually watch back the 30-minute preamble that I have on section 2's texturing class yesterday, I actually go through and I rip apart, so harshly criticize a lot of the shells that I had with that that flag podium that I'm texturing. I go back and I rip on it, saying, for example, I didn't double check the edge loops that unfold from strip gave me, which caused them to be irregularly shaped or have some curvature to them, some waviness, which made it a lot harder to go through and create tracks and edge highlights and edge shadows and all that stuff. While I could say, yeah, I'm doing it in 15 minutes, still, it's something that needs to be adjusted. So I went back into the unwrap, adjusted them. Thankfully, it didn't screw up too much of the shell, and then I just kept working. So I'd highly recommend that you guys watch back that 30-minute preamble from yesterday's class. So unfold from strip, it's giving me a pretty good result. Again, you're going to have to look in only one corner for squares, because what it's basically doing is it's forcing this edge and this edge to be the same length when obviously they're not. So it is injecting distortion, but it's controlled distortion. Square, garbage, square, garbage. If both sides of the mesh were lacking squares, or both corners of the mesh were lacking squares, that means that the unwrap is wrong. So I would have to go through and get my squares back. So depending on what you're unwrapping, technique used is going to change. There's pros and cons to basically everything. So unfortunately and fortunately, when it comes to unwrapping, it really does come down to throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And as you guys get further and further into texturing, it's also going to become a matter of, I think this will work with the way I want to texture it. Doing a really quick unwrap just to get it to a state that you can test with. Doing a texture test like I did with the tail fin and the hello. Test it. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't work, use a different unwrap method. So there is quite a bit of experimentation involved. Backtail engines, it's basically the same thing as this guy. Sorry, come here. That's this. So convert to polygon, planar, get on the correct axes, fit center, and planar. Maybe a little bit of a relax or peel, but it's not going to be able to change much. Again, depending on what you're doing to it, if it's a radial gradient, this is enough, and it's a lot easier to pack with. If you have some actual structure in there, you're probably going to have to break and then peel, and that becomes easier to texture or apply certain textures to, but it's going to be harder to pack with and harder to texture on depending on what you're doing. Pro tip for the assignment that you guys have. Bingo. Just pointing out the differences. This guy, whoops, not playing projection. Unfold from strip won't work on it. I'll just break these guys off. Sorry, these guys. So I'll just grab it. Cylindrical. Looking for perfect squares in the corner. Don't have it. There she is. Double check the others. Yep, it's consistent. So, oh, and there's the display error, display bug. Apologies is asking, when we get into more organic meshes, will the workflow change drastically? Nope. And a lot of the same considerations need to be made. So these guys are still stacked. Pull. Move. Stitch. Pretty much the only thing that's going to change as far as the workflow, well, depending on who's teaching. Usually when I'm working with organic mesh, I'm still using the exact same tools. The only one that gets added on is, right now we're using Quick Peel to mathematically calculate the result across the entire mesh with one point of reference. So if I decide these polygons are perfect, I pin them, I tell Max to calculate the rest of the mesh based on them. If I was doing an organic mesh, which this has curvature, so it's organic, the only thing that changes is that now I'm going to need to use multiple points of reference throughout the mesh in order to do the unwrap. Rather than using Quick Peel for it, I'll actually be using Peel mode. The only difference between Quick Peel and Peel mode is whereas Quick Peel is a one-time iteration or a single iteration of trying to get edge lengths consistent with the 3D model that it corresponds to, Peel mode will allow you to actually start adjusting the mesh. And as you move vertices, it'll do a live recalculation or a real-time recalculation of where or what the other edge lengths should be as you're working. So each time you move a vertice, it'll automatically pin itself. So auto pin moved vertices. And obviously this can become a gigantic mess very quickly. So even though it has an organic component to it, it's not really all that advantageous to be using Peel mode. With characters, on the other hand, and something that I'll be working with you on next week, that changes. You guys won't have to do an organic mesh, or won't have to use, or I would actually recommend against using Peel mode for anything that you guys get in Texture 1, but it's the only sort of added level of difficulty that you'll experience when you go to organics. So yeah, good question. Really good question. Go 120 undo states. Finally, with the body, again, look for small pieces that you can work with. Don't try unwrapping the entire thing all at once. You'll drive yourself absolutely insane. chop it up into smaller pieces. So look for structures that you've already unwrapped before. These little engine insets are basically the exact same thing that we have on the back. It's these things. Process is the exact same. Grab them. Grow selection. Pop them off either with quick peel and attach turned on, or break, or rerunning a planar projection. They'll all get you to the same point. Oh, sorry, in the same neighborhood. So I just pop them off with break, peel. I definitely don't have 3 polygons, or sorry, 3 squares per face to check for distortion. Tiling goes up. Still distorted. I need to adjust this one without affecting this one. Breaks. Peels. Bingo. Same thing on the other side. Break. Peel. If I know for a fact that there is going to be no directional information on this, and simplify things, no text, I can stack these together. So once I've packed what one UV space, so say it ends up right here. Again, a little easier to work with if these are oriented to the world, to either X or Y, so vertically or horizontally. Set one, grab one edge, make it straight. Set that as your pins. Take off the auto pins that Max made. Peel. Grab the other, so everything's been packed. All of your other shells are in here. All your duplicates or your stacks are still outside. Grab this guy, pull him in. Find the exact same edge that you just pinned. So it's this polygon, oh sorry, this vertice and this vertice. Get the edge lengths to match. So literally just snap the vertices one atop the other. Pin it. Peel it. Mirror it. And snap it. Done. It is a little bit more work to get there rather than just having them separated. But the obvious benefit is that now you only have to texture it once. So I know that for the A-wing, some people split the tail fins into 4 separate sides. So they had 4 shells, one for the left side and the right side. Sorry, one for the left side, one for the right side. So a set of 2, and then they had a set of 2 for the left fin and a set of 2 for the right fin. It's not wrong. Just realize that as you add more and more shells, or as you pass on the opportunity to overlap shells, that means that you're going to be taking up more UV space. Individual shells need to be smaller, and your texture is going to be comparatively lower res. So a texture that has overlap shells is going to look a lot cleaner and crisper at 1024 resolution than another model that has no overlap shells or no stack shells, also at a 1024 resolution. It's not going to be night and day, but it's going to be an appreciable difference between the two. After that, again, look for pieces that you've seen before. So this is the exact same formation, it's just in a different place. Break, break. Just so I don't have to align things later on. I've already got a straight edge. Pin them, peel them, done. So keep breaking off pieces. Don't feel like you need to unwrap the whole thing. Just look for small indicators that you know are going to be either easier to unwrap or that you've already done somewhere else on the model. So grab, pin, peel, 1-1. And eventually you will be able to start seeing where all of your mesh breaks need to happen. And where you have a 90-degree or hard corner, so 90-degree, greater than 90, and a hard edge, those are probably breaks, or should be breaks. Peel. I'll skip the break step by turning on detach, peel. 1-1. Pre-isolate. And just chop away at it. It's the easiest way to do it. And, okay, maybe not the easiest way, but it's the easiest way to do it without feeling overwhelmed. Because you gradually are looking at less and less geometry. So, enough of demonstration. At this point, follow along. So, I did all of that on a new Unwrap UVW modifier. I have the same Unwrap UVWs below it that you guys do. So I can just trash. Ta-da. I'd be careful for you guys at this point, working with either multiple edit polys in stack or multiple Unwrap UVWs in stack. So later on, when you guys are more comfortable, more experienced at this, we will be adding in multiple modifiers and then going back to edit poly or Unwrap UVW. For right now, I would highly recommend against doing it, just because it's so easy for you to accidentally go down in your stack, make a vertex or a UV adjustment, then go back up and everything has exploded. And I mean that quite literally. It will, depending on what you do, actually explode your shells like everywhere. Stuff will be overlapped, stuff will, yeah, it's just not a good time. Excuse me. So, I'm good to go. Tools, render template. Let's do 2048. I'm pretty sure I don't have a resolution requirement for you guys. Let me double check that though. I do not. So yeah, you guys are free to make 1K, 2K. Again, at 4K, you're not really going to be getting much appreciable increase in texture quality. It's the same reason that we don't increase viewport resolution past 2048. It just becomes it reaches a point of depreciating returns after 2048. Same thing here. So tools, render UV template, 2048, 2048, which means I can easily scale this down to a 1024 if I decide I need to. I wouldn't want to start at 1024 and then realize I need a 2048. Render UV template. There's all my shells. Save. Desktop, because I'm lazy. Wild Goose underscore UVs. Obviously I already have it. PNG, save, confirm overwrite, yep. And bring it to Photoshop. There it is. So here's my UVs layer. All the lines came in white, so I immediately hit a Control I. Make a new layer, set it underneath, and just flood it white so I can see what the hell's going on. If I have opacity on, I can probably leave it as is, so when I saved it out, if it was an image format that supported transparency and I chose to have it on, I don't need to do anything else. Maybe I'll turn on multiply just because I'm used to it. If you have a UV sheet that doesn't have transparency, or sorry, a UV template rather that doesn't have transparency, don't worry about it. Just go blend mode, multiply, that's it. Lock the layer. As soon as you set it to multiply, it'll just overlay itself onto wherever you're working on rather. Yep. I don't think I've increased my undo states in Photoshop, so oh, maybe I did. So, as always, immediately name stuff as you make it. So these are my UVs, name them as such. I'm used to, or I'm in the practice of immediately setting my UV layer to multiply, regardless of if I have an alpha channel or not. It's just ingrained in me at this point. Realistically, there's no difference between having it set to multiply versus set to normal. I'm just used to it. If you've saved out in an image format that doesn't support the alpha channel, or the image just doesn't have alpha channel turned on, don't resave it. You don't need to. Just go into the blending mode for that layer, so layer that your UVs are on, and switch it from normal to multiply. That's it. Now when I do a flood underneath it, assuming that it's not white, I'll still have the black lines visible over top of my texture, so the black lines from the UV template, but they're not going to discolor anything that I work on. So let's see. Last class I did an Evangelion 01. Since I've already got it going, I'll do this one as Evangelion 00. Not the proto. Did you invert your color? Sorry, the step I skipped. When you bring the lines in, they're white. So hit Control I. Sorry about that. So I'm going to do test model 00 color scheme. If that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. I'm just geeking out. So my primary is going to be blue. Now this is going to be a different workflow than you guys are used to inside of digital drawing. I am introducing you to the substance-based or the substance painter-based workflow with a program that you're already familiar with. So I'm going to be doing things a little differently than you would inside of digital drawing, because if you can be comfortable with this process when we transition to Substance Painter in term 3, so next term, you won't really have to learn the process, you'll just have to learn the buttons and the terminology. And half the terminology I'll be teaching you from this point forward, including the end of today's lesson, which is going to have another demonstration on it. So start with floods. So Ava unit 00 is blue, secondary of white, and then a minor tertiary of orange. Orange or red? I'll say orange. No, it's green. Again, I'm not texturing with reference up, which is a big no-no. So white flood, control backspace, green flood. Just as a reminder for the quick keys that I'm using inside of Photoshop, Alt backspace will flood your foreground color. So whatever color you've currently picked here, foreground. Control backspace will flood your background color. So it's a nice way to quickly get through your colors. Actually, I'm going to change it to yellow, just because. So I've just got floods. That's it, flat colors. I know I have something that's blue, something that's white, and something that's yellow. Now I'm ready to actually start assigning what colors go where. So I'll just mute my other two flood layers so I can actually see my blue. And let's see, I want this to be blue. I want this to be blue. So I'm just drawing really loose lassos. I could be using a polygon, I should be using a polygon lasso since I've got all these straight edges everywhere. Also, I don't have it up, but if you guys have dual monitors, the big advantage obviously being that you can have this up on the side or 3CO Max up on one monitor and Photoshop open on your other. So if you're not sure what polygon corresponds to what piece of the model, so right now I'm setting, my mouse is really bad for double clicking at this point. I need to buy a new mouse this weekend. So I'm familiar with this model to a certain extent. This is the area that I've got selected, and I already know that it's going to correspond to these polygons. So again, if you have dual monitors, it makes life a little easier. It's not a requirement because there's nothing stopping me from texturing inside of Photoshop, pausing, saying, where are these polygons, going to max, finding them, confirming, yep, that's what I thought they were, and then continue. So the side of the canopy is getting blue. This back's her like shrimp tail. That's getting blue as well. So that's continuously blue over the back of the engine area. What else is going to be blue? These guys will be blue. So these are the engine covers over top those vents. So one of the nice things about working so low poly like this is that you can use the polygon lasso tool to do your selections quickly. And actually I'm going to set the main engine to being blue as well. So that's the main large body of the engine, and I'm about to adjust it with white and yellow floods. So once I've got those selected, what I typically do when I'm texturing inside of Photoshop is I've done these really sloppy, very loose selections. So that's what I currently have selected. So I'm toggling quick mask with Q or Quebec on my keyboard, just so I can highlight or easily show you guys what's where or what I currently have selected. To make it a little less messy, I'm going to go into the UVs layer with the magic wand, and then I'm going to hold down Alt, click an empty space, so not on top of any of the shells, and that's basically going to shrink wrap my selection to the actual UV borders. Now, before I do the next step, I'm going to generate 2 files at this point. So what I'm about to do, don't. I'm going to leave it with that current selection. So these are edges, sorry, these are blue areas or blue edges right on the UV borders. I'm going to save it out as my diffuse. So that one is wrong. What I want you guys to do, oops, is once you have your selections shrink wrapped to the UV shells, go up to the top, select, modify, and expand. So you want to expand your selection by between 4 and 6 pixels. So I'm going to go 4, and then just create a mask. So it's this icon down at the bottom. It'll automatically convert your selection to a mask. And I just realized that I goofed my selections here, so give me 10 seconds. There we go. So that's going to be my actual diffuse. Rather than having to hit Control-Shift-S every single time I want to save this as a PNG, I'm going to hide my UVs, so hide the UV layer. Something to note that if you have blank areas on your texture, the default color for an empty alpha is 100% white. Just keep that in mind. So rather than hitting Control-Shift-S each time I want to save this out, I'm going to press Alt and then F9. Or if it's already a piece of your UI, I usually tear it off because, I don't know, I just do. If it's still in your UI, just look for the little playback button or the play button on the side for actions. And I'll delete the one I already have. So you're going to go new page icon, or new action icon rather. Click. This is save as diffuse. I've already got a custom actions folder in here, so this doesn't necessarily need to be anything other than default actions, but I'll set to my custom. And then I'm going to assign it to a hotkey. So from the function key dropdown, this is completely individual preference. I'm going to use F9, and I'm going to use the modification key of Control. So now when I hit Control F9, it's going to run the series of actions that I'm about to record. And I'll make it red, because why not? So, sure, give me 1 second to finish this up, and I'll do the shrink wrap. So, name, save as diffuse, set, doesn't matter. And I've tied it to a F9 key. All you're going to do is hit record, hit Control-Shift-S for the first and last time, switch your file type to a PNG, TGA, or a TIF. All those are valid, just don't give me JPEGs, compression sucks. I'm going to call it Wild Goose Diffuse, and I've already got one going, so I'm going to call it Diffuse 00. Save. As soon as that save command finishes, immediately hit stop. Don't do anything else. So now, I'll just demo what's happening now. Where's the correct one? This one. So that's what just got saved out. Now that I have it as a command, sorry, as an action rather, I can go hello, hit Control F9, and when I open the file, again, automatically overwrites, and inside of Max, it automatically updates. Correct. I've brought it into Photoshop, and I've started to create masks for all the individual components. So someone asked me to do the shrink wrap process again. So I'll actually do it with this white flood layer. It's going to be the same idea. It's just I'm flooding for white as opposed to flooding for blue. So what areas do I want to be white? I want this guy to be white. I want sort of like a white ring or white trim around the front and back of the engine. And maybe I'll put like a little strip of white in there too. A little stripe rather, not strip, stripe. A little stripe of white. And the underside of the nose, I'll set that as white as well. So I'm being very loose with these selections. I'm just making sure that they're encompassing the shell or the piece of the shell that I want to set to be white. I'll set a blue stripe through the tail fin as well. Actually, I won't do that yet. I'll do that in a second. So front and back of the engine, I've got the nose of the nose of the ship. So here's how it was unwrapped has a direct impact on how easy it is to texture. So I've got part of the nose attached to this canopy piece and part of it off on its own. So you won't realize which one is going to cause more work until you're actually starting to do the work. I'll put a white stripe across the top here. I'll put a white stripe across the top here. So I'm just very generally, or very loosely rather, indicating where I want this to be white. This is going to be white as well. This is going to be white as well. Yep, you may already have a UV template with the exact same name. So if that's the case, oh, bizarre. So once you have that really loose selection, go into your UV layer. So this is where all of the line work is. Switch to the magic wand with W. And then hold down Alt. Place your cursor over blank space, so not on top of a shell. And just click. and that will quote unquote shrink wrap your selection to that area. In this case, I've got an area encompassed by the canopy, so this would be a ton of wasted UV space. This stuff should be moved in to fill it up, but I'll just hold down Alt, click. I don't really need to because I'm going to be overriding it in a second, but good practice. And then I'm going to go select, modify, expand between 4 and 6 pixels. So this value will change depending on what resolution you're working at. And I'm about to show you what it's doing, why you need it, and why it's an issue if you don't. So expand by 4 pixels. So now it's the area that I had loosely selected, shrink wrapped, and now expanded rather by 4 pixels out. And I'm going to use this as the white layers mask. So going to white flood, create mask. Select, modify, select, modify, and expand. No problem. So remember, I saved out 2 versions of this. One where I added that 4 pixel expansion, one where I didn't. So this is demonstration. If I go into max, please PNG. For templates, it's not as big a deal, but when it comes to saving textures, please never give me a JPEG. It's primarily used for the internet because it's such a good compression or rate of compression, but that rate of compression also causes a lot of visual fidelity loss. So I've got 2 versions of my diffuse texture. This one has bleed, or that 4 pixel expansion. This one does not. So this is the one that doesn't. And I did save my UV template into it, so oops. So give me 1 tick. Select, modify. So I'm just going to go in reverse, modify, contract, 4 pixels. Yes. And it automatically updates. So the reason you need that little bit of bleed or that little bit of expansion, and because I have them all the same colors, isn't going to work perfectly, so give me 1 tick. Oops. Sorry, I didn't put different colors on because I chose different colors between the 2. There we go. So the reason why that you need to have that 1 little extra pixel of bleed is areas like this. So again, I'm not getting the best demonstration of it because my colors are just too close to one another. But I'm not sure if the Discord stream will pick this up, but I know the Twitch stream will. I've got this dotted line of white trimming down the sides of my engine, or the front sort of mouth intake of the engine. And then I've got it coming down the sides as well. So I've got this white line of noise on both sides. Here it is. Here it is on the other side. So white, white, white. Remember, these are supposed to be flat blue. It's one continuous shade of blue from this side to this side. Here, same thing. This white dotted line. At different distances, it may look better or worse. So right now, not too bad. When I'm back here, holy smoke, I can see an actual white line going across the back. So I actually have a better demonstration of this, or a better series of images of this in that week 2 write-up, where I have cubes with different colored faces. So what that extra select expand 4 pixels is doing when Max, Unity, Frostbite, Unreal, whatever, is looking at your texture, depending on the distance to camera, it's saying, okay, come on, show, there we go. It's saying, okay, on this side, the texture author has said they want it to be blue. So it's all blue. But what happens if the pixel that falls in this area is half white and half blue? The engine doesn't know what color to make it, so it guesses, or it guesses or blurs it. So rather than saying blue pixel, it's now going to say lighter blue pixel. Or if it's falling right on this edge, it's going to be pretty close to white. If I bring in the texture that does have the correct bleed on it, or that expand 4 pixels, so this is the one that you guys saved out. Now I've got all this blue on both sides of the UV border. No matter what distance I am from the ship, it's full blue. So anytime you're working with a texture, and obviously this is a little behind, so I'm going to go Control Shift S, just because I want to make sure I'm saving over the correct one. Yep. And I'll actually set it to, I'll get rid of my alpha layer so it's not defaulting white. There we go. This is before when I had it messed up. Yeah. Once you have the loose selection drawn in, magic wand. Yeah. So, sorry, this is before I added in that pixel bleed. So click, select, modify, expand 4. There we go. And so you have a shell like this selected, or you have a loose highlight over it. And you go into the UVs layer, magic wand, alt select an empty space, and it doesn't shrink to it. Make sure that you're still clicking inside the selection. out here nothing is selected. Yeah, no worries. It's just you don't want to be deselecting the center of the shell because that's going to give you a hole. So I'll hide. I'll just make sure that I have my action set to be correct. Which one of these am I supposed to be using? This is why you properly name your stuff. That was a... So now, no matter what distance I'm at, no matter what happens to my camera, no matter where the mesh is in 3D space, no white line. In the example I gave, one face is green, one face is yellow, one face is red. And rather than having a white base, it's actually fuchsia. So you can really see the contrast, or you can see the result of the bleed not taking or not being properly placed. Okay. Same idea. So now I'm going to start working with some more colors. If the majority of my craft is going to be presumably blue, I actually don't need that mask anymore. It's going to be handy to come back to it later. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and mute the mask, effectively turning the mask off but still saving it. So that red X means the mask is currently muted. Now, because I have my action set, I don't have to press Control-Shift-S anymore. I can just Control-F9. There it is. And I can keep working. So now I've got a mask driving what areas are white. And I'm going to have a mask driving what areas are yellow. So what areas do I want to have as yellow? The nose might be interesting, actually. And I'm going to do those little flappy things. This intake is going to turn yellow. What else can I turn yellow? Actually, I don't have a racing stripe on this yet, so I'll do that. Let's do a stripe here. Pretty sure I know where this is, but I'm going to double check. Yep. Wait, is it? Sorry. Top to side. Yes. So it's actually this area. So again, I'm just quickly drawing out what areas I want to turn yellow. I'm going to give it a low yellow stripe here. Magic wand on UVs in empty space. Select, modify, expand, mask. How big is your or has your hard drive started to fill up? Like, do you have enough free space on your hard drive? I know I've been running into troubles with Photoshop munching on my hard drive space recently, so that's going to be my first suspicion, rather. I have a slot for it. If you have a slot for an M2 drive, I highly recommend them. I assume that's sorry, my tech skills, my tech language is way behind where I would prefer it to be. I assume that's a state of hard drive or type of hard drive. Sorry, that's the apologies from the Twitch chat. On the new motherboard, there's a slot for a very small hard drive. Oh, cool. Well, my motherboard is, when I buy this computer, 10 years old, I think. So yeah, I think I need a system upgrade at this point, but money. Yeah, I'm flying with stuff that's been cobbled together. My system is a Frankenstein. Oh yeah. Well, isn't the GPU market pretty good now at this point with the RTX? Well, assuming you're not getting an RTX. I mean, everyone wants an RTX, but not everyone can afford an RTX. Market. And from Scumlords Kill to Market. Oof. I sense some hostility, albeit potentially founded. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm just gonna AFK for one quick tick. Sorry about that. It's all good. No worries. Just my body does not like me. Which realistically I don't blame it. I'm pretty tough on it. It's all about the Ian diet. caffeine, nicotine, rip. So, while you're working with a mask, one of the biggest advantages is if I were to bring in a photo texture, so I will in a second, I can quickly make it visible in some areas, invisible in others. But for the time being, I'm actually going to just go into the, actually I'll stay to one mask rather than a mask of a mask. So I've got these yellow areas. One of them is a racing stripe going over the top of the, top rather of the canopy. And I've got some on the nose as well. Didn't catch the bottom of the nose, so give me 1 second. 1 second rather to do that. Actually, I'll switch this back to white. So I'll go Ricky. Why is it not letting me select this? There we go. Switch that back to white. I like the white better. And the underside is yellow. So one of the advantages to working with masks, and later on it'll be basically a requirement. So for now, if you want to paint on a single layer, I'm not going to stop you. But whenever I'm texturing something, I am going to be in a layered stack. The nicest thing about working with masks, so as I'm looking around, if I do a couple more iterations of the racing stripe, I'm sure I can get these to connect with one another. The back is actually doing pretty well, surprisingly, considering I wasn't using the edge. This side, definitely more of a miss. But the only time you find something that's completely smooth, completely sort of dent, air, or scuff free is when it's been freshly manufactured. So that entire idea of once you drive a car off the lot, it loses 50% of its value or whatever the percentile is. That's kind of true for texturing. Very seldom, if ever, do you see something that's completely pristine. If you have your layers set up as masks, again, I'm going to be bringing in a photo texture in a second. If you're in masks, I can say go to this yellow area, take off my transfer, give myself some shape dynamics, set it to pen pressure, and just inside the mask itself, if I want an area to be yellow from inside the mask, I start painting with white. So you'll notice on the left hand side I can only use black and white because those are the only colors that the mask can interpret. So if I start going with black, harden the edge of my brush so this isn't tapered in any way, I can start chewing basically into the side of that racing stripe and breaking up the clean straight edge. While I'm doing this, I can also take off part of the corner. Now I'm obviously doing this much faster than I would normally because I just want to demonstrate it. But as I add that level of degradation to it, and later on you guys will actually do studies of what I'm doing right now, or what I'm introducing you to right now. So think of it like the Big Brother assignment to the material spheres. but that's later on. Anywhere that I have this quote-unquote yellow paint, I'm just going to chew at. So chew, 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 chew. Across the top. Wow. Wasn't watching. Hide my UVs. Save it. And then in Max, again, Max will automatically resample your texture or redraw your texture. It may not do it as soon as you flip back to Max, but just give your camera a little bit of a rotation and it'll pop in. Now, I have some areas where my brush stroke is really obvious. So this is a little too uniform. But now as I've started to add degradation to that racing stripe, even though I don't have perfect alignment, so you can actually see the slip here, the eye no longer expects it. So you've got this broken yellow line or this jagged yellow line coming up. Why would you expect it to perfectly sit in or line up with the other? Now, you don't want it to go too far, but degradation actually helps hide mistakes or hides areas that you can't really address as well as you'd want to. If I decide I kind of liked that where it was, or I need to undo it, rather than having to go back and painting in yellow, or worse yet, if it was a photograph texture that I was actually erasing while I was working, having to reload that texture back in, replace it, realign it, rescale it, whatever. If you're using a mask, I can just go back with a white brush and bring it back in. Hide my UVs, save. There's the same area. Now it looks better. So I'm going to use that entire idea of masking stuff out by grabbing a texture, or sorry, a photograph texture. So I don't expect you guys to do this stage on this on this in-class demonstration / assignment, but I'm going to go File, Open. I'm going to go to my hard drive, and I have a textures directory at my root with a revolving list of different metal textures. Most of these are from textures.com. So I'm not sure, remind me, have I actually talked about textures.com and gone through the process for it? Perfect. So textures.com. And say right now I'm working on something that's metal, so I'll go metal. And these are all of the metal textures that are hosted on textures.com. Keep going. So it's a gigantic library of photographic textures. All of them have really good light sourcing on them, so they're for the most part very uniformly lit, which will come in, or we'll talk about in a second. So scratched and chipped paint. I always love a good rusted wear and tear texture or rusty metal. I love this sort of thing. Diamond plate steel, groove plated steel, stamped steel, diamond plated steel, bunch of decals. It's a great resource. Even better, yes, even better, this is free. Asterisk. It's free, or there is a free membership, which currently I'm set to free because I don't have need for most of this stuff right now, or at least not the high res versions. So if you create a free account, you can go to one of these textures. So I don't know, this one, or actually I just said how much I like this one, so I'll grab it. So with a free account, every day you are assigned or given, your account is topped up with up to 15 quote unquote credits. So every 24 hours your balance goes up to 15 credits. Depending on the size or the resolution of the texture that you want to download, it could be 1 credit, 2 credits, etc. The only drawback is certain resolutions are only available to paid members. So 3000 by 2125 paid only. That being said, you guys are not going to be doing something this high res at this point. So you can absolutely get away with the free textures or the single credit textures. That being said, in this assignment, I do say that you can use photographic or photo source textures, but do not just copy and paste them. So, for example, this is one of the steel plate textures from textures.com. I, honest to God, love this one, just because it's got such variety to it. So, again, in real life, there's nothing that's completely perfect. The little errors is what makes something realistic. So someone will look at this and say, yeah, it's a great piece of metal. Texture artists will look at it and say, yeah, it's a great piece of metal, but it's got all this like sort of light orange in here, and there's some yellow, and then there's some blue, and yeah. Love it. Anyway, I'm going to copy this piece out. Go over to my Wild Goose, paste it in. This is my bare metal. And I'm going to use a mask to control where it becomes visible. So I'll create a mask. I don't want the entire thing to be bare metal. It's only going to be visible in small sections, small areas. So as soon as the mask is created, I'll immediately hit Control-I to invert it. And anywhere that there's going to be or I feel there should be a scratch, I'm going to paint in with white on the mask. So some of the bigger chunks that are missing out of this racing stripe maybe got hit by a piece of metallic or stone debris. So it's not just a scrape, but it's a dent. I'll paint in some metal to be visible in that area. Again, I'm just painting with black and white. Areas where, maybe the cars have been trading paint with one another. So there's 2 cars racing, start bumping one another. Someone takes a bad turn, gives a little love. So certain areas are going to accrue or gather degradation at different rates. So if I'm looking at these edges, these 2 edges, and this entire surface, it's probably going to get pretty scuffed. So I'll find those edges on my texture. And again, paint them in with white, or paint that metal in with white. So I'll start in the middle of the poly with a really soft line, soft hand rather, or a really thin stroke. And then as I get close to a vertice, I'll just increase my pen pressure. Go over to the top shell, and I just did the exact opposite if I want. Light to heavy, light to heavy, back and forth. So I'll do a quick save, see what it looks like. So the other big advantage to having a little bit of wear and tear on things is that can actually hide some of your seams. So if I had a racing stripe on the side here that needed to line up, or should have lined up, so I'll go back into my yellow. And this is 1, 2. Flood, hide, save. Now I don't even have to worry about these lining up. As long as I'm not completely off in their shape. So slight difference in line weight or line width. But because of that wear and tear that I injected into it, where all of the paint has been just been completely stripped, I don't have to worry about it. So not only are you making the material, or the texture rather, more realistic, you're also using it to hide the body, so to speak. You're hiding your mistakes, while at the same time making the texture more believable. So I'm just eating away at that racing stripe, again, doing it inside the mask. Save. So chew, 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 chew. When I'm ready to do another material, say I want to quickly block in the glass canopy, new layer, canopy, make it black, UV's layer, trace it out, shrink wrap it, select, modify, expand, 4 pixels, mask. Rather than painting directly onto it, again, you could, I would not recommend it for the purposes rather of texturing at least. Well, I could paint directly onto it, I'm going to create a new layer. New layer. We call this canopy overlay or canopy screen, because I'm going to set it to screen. And with the soft edge brush, set the airbrushing or opacity. I'll just slowly start building it up. If I feel like I want to put a roll bar on there, new layer. Polygonal lasso. This time, rather than doing the expand, I'm just going to make sure that my selection goes past the UV shell. Mask. And I don't know, let's go yellow again. I don't paint much with yellow because I don't like how bright of a color it is. So, all the more reason to do it more often. And I'll set this guy, or this trim rather, over to yellow as well. There we go. So, as you guys get introduced to more and more materials, more and more texture types, on the one hand, your textures are going to look better, your objects are going to look better. On the other hand, you're going to be slowly having to do more and more work. So, what I'm about to show you, you won't have to do for this assignment. Actually, wait, I'm going out of order. One thing that I do want you guys doing is adding in structures that don't exist on the original model. So with the A-wing, you guys were doing greebling and the raised rings on the outsides of the engines. Now you have a little bit more creative freedom with it, or you will have some more creative freedom with it. But there's also going to be a point of reference that you can use. So it's sort of like the Pantone assignment where this is the baseline. If you want to go in a different direction, as long as it has the same level of complexity, go for it. So I'm going to start adding some actual form details to this. I'm going to just do a large panel on the side. And I'm going to do it two different ways. So I'll go new layer, side panel. And I'll work on this side first. And I'll just go marquee, click, 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 click. That's too low. Is it? 1 second. No, it isn't. So personally, I always prefer the hand-done approach. I like hand-painted textures as long as they're not too sloppy or the line work isn't too loose. That being said, certain times it's a lot clearer to work with a preset. So I'm going to decide what the side panel's color is. So I'll go, let's go white. It's going to be a little bit of a shift in colors, but why not? So I'm going to go white and flood it. And then from there, I'm going to go to the side panel layer. So that's what currently has this shape on it. FX, and bevel and emboss. So depending on the criteria set by your digital drawing instructor, some of this stuff or some of the presets inside of Photoshop aren't acceptable on those assignments. So even though I'll accept them, make sure that you're clear as to whether or not you can be using them in digital drawing. But I'm just going to go bevel and emboss. I'm going to go with the pillow so that it actually creates a bit of an indentation. Technique, let's go chisel hard. Make it a really strong indentation. I'll go up. That size is going to determine how big of a seam I have between my panel and the main body. Softens it. The main way that humans tell whether something is 3D is whether or not, or is the placement of highlights and shadows on it. That's what that shading component is. So just to hammer home this point, because as we go, we're going to be talking about where light hits an object, how we can control how light hits an object. If I create a sphere and flat light it, or flatly light it, make it flat lit. And actually, there's a better light for this. Why are you giving me shadows down here? There. Until you have a highlight and a shadow, there's no 3D form to it. As soon as you add one in, so this is something that I made earlier. Where is it? I swear it was in here somewhere. Okay, whatever. We'll just make it again. So all I'm going to do is flood 50% gray. One area is going to get a highlight. One area going to get a shadow. That's it. That's my texture. So basically, one of your first digital drawing assignments. Here's a sphere, place a highlight on it, place a shadow on it. Now it's starting to look three-dimensional. When you're doing textures, depending on what environment they need to be going into. Sometimes it's okay to do this. You're basically adding in lighting information. Good example of a game that does this. World of Warcraft. Oops, images. Is that the biggest they have? Tools, size, large. So there are areas of highlight inside the colored texture. You can actually see some of the brush strokes for the highlight on the top of the scarf, a little bit of a drop shadow, darker drop shadow, lightening of the quote-unquote fur on the chest, a little bit more drop shadow. Typically when you see light and shadow information inside of a colored texture, so what I've currently got going right now, you can see some light and some shadow. It's referred to as a diffuse map or diffuse color. So typically diffuse means there's light and shadow as well as color. The problem with doing this is that if I bring in the light, if the light is in the same place as it would be to cast that highlight, no problem. No one's going to notice anything. As soon as that light moves, now I've got a white highlight pointed away from my light. Doesn't make sense. So anytime that you're adding highlight or specular information to an object, be subtle. Don't add on a big glaring highlight like this. Oops. It may look good from a single direction or with a single source of illumination, but as soon as that light moves, it doesn't make sense anymore. So I'll just bring in a second light, drop its intensity substantially. 0.2, not 2. There's my hot highlight, so it's the brightest point on the object. And based on where the shadows are, I know that my actual source of illumination is over here. So this is no longer correct. So be subtle with it. Again, adding in or controlling where light and shadow appears on your model. That's what's going to make it appear or give it the illusion of being three-dimensional. So when I ran that bevel and emboss, inside shading, there is an option to change where the light is coming from. So that it assumes that your object is that middle point, and then that little sphere, that little circle is your light. So in this case, I want my light to be over here, so that the top gets a shadow, the bottom gets a highlight. I can dial up my blends, make it a little stark. It works. Alternatively, like I said, I prefer hand-done textures. I enjoy doing hand-done textures. I find them to be enjoyable. So typically I'll just do it myself. makes something appear 3D is whether or not there's shadow information on it. Shadow and highlight. Once I've established that there is a 4, I'll just do a quick whoops, Shift I. So shadows imply recesses. Highlights typically indicate protrusions. Again, depends on what kind of style you're looking for or you're going for. You could definitely curve these out a bit more. And that's actually pretty easy. If I control click the layer, again, I'll select everything on it. Select, modify, smooth. I'll round it out. I'll do that one more time. Select, modify, smooth, 10. Only downside is that because I was doing everything on a single layer, now I have to go back and do those fake drop shadows again, or what are actually ambient occlusion shadows. And hopefully everyone's ears perked up when I said ambient occlusion shadows, since that's the title of the next homework assignment. Of regarding ambient occlusion or light sources. Sweet, makes my job easier. Not technically ambient occlusion, but the properties of light. Yeah, no worries. I just don't want someone to hear, yeah. So what you described, if something hits a red object and the light bounces and hits a white object and it casts a red tone, it's global illumination. On the computer side anyway. So once I've got some form in there, now I've just made my structure a little more complex. I can go into the mask for my metal. Switch my sorting a little bit. So now that my metal is on the top, this is side panel manual. And go into my metallic texture. So this is where my scuffs are coming from. Take off airbrushing, bring shape dynamics back on, increase my brush hardness, and I can start to sell that this is actually a raised piece of geometry, or a raised structure at the very least, by getting wear and tear to sort of follow the rules or the implied structure that I've just given this. So anywhere there's a corner, typically that's going to pick up more abrasion. And I don't expect you guys to do full wear and tear or full degradation studies at this point. Again, that's one of Anson's favorite assignments at this point. Maybe have a little bit of a drop C in here, drop V rather. maybe some scuffing somewhere. So someone took a crowbar and tried to open this panel, causing the paint to chip. So starts to really sell the idea that this is a three-dimensional aspect to the object, even though we, as the actual people working on it, know there's no actual geometry there. Using the same trick in areas like the little vents on the back. So marquee selection, select, modify, smooth, 10 pixels. Gives me some nice round edges. I can then flood this black. Move tool, hold down Alt, pull, pull, to just quickly clone out a couple copies rather. So rather than hitting Control J to duplicate and creating a bunch of layers that I would then have to collapse, if I just have a selection, V, hold Alt, and drag, I can make as many copies as I want, all within the same layer. And actually I meant to do those not on this layer, but this one. I'm here. Really need a new mouse. Copy layer style. Paste layer style. Same idea. Hide UVs, save. One thing to be careful of, I've mentioned it inside of Discord, but just to reiterate, whenever possible, avoid 100% black. And Dan rather ended up adding on avoid 100% white. He's correct. You never want full 100% black or full 100% white. So this is no bueno. Because if you have full black, I'll just take off my highlight on the canopy. It becomes a hole, or it has the appearance of a hole, so you're looking at negative space through the object. Same idea if it's a full 100% white. So it just becomes, or it starts to look like negative space, especially once you start adding highlights to it. So don't do it. Cap yourself out at, I think he gave the specific values that he uses, but as long as I can visually tell that's not 100% black, that's all I care about for now. And this is what you guys are going to be expected to do for next week. So I'll make the homework visible to you, and then I'm going to do a short little demonstration. So this is due next week, 24 hours after the start of class. I've been working on the Wild Goose race car from F-Zero with you in class. You guys on your own are to unwrap and texture the Blue Falcon. So there's an F-Zero racer.max file inside of homework 2. That is this model. You guys are to unwrap it on your own and then texture it. By all means, if you want to use a different theme than the actual F-Zero racer, you're free to do so. Just don't drop the structural elements. So the racing number, the wear and tear on the racing stripes or on the either actual or implied structure. So hopefully this looks familiar to what I just did. All of it, actually. Just don't simplify it. Also, FOL changed the PDF viewer, which is kind of nice. So I provide you with a model, low poly model of the Blue Falcon from F-Zero. Your task is to UV unwrap the model and create a diffuse map for it. So I want to see highlights and shadows baked into your actual texture. When creating, when I say baked, I mean painted. When creating the diffuse map, I will be looking for a combination of hand-drawn and photo elements. Do not just CMP or copy and paste photos. You can use them as starting points, but I should not be able to look at a piece of your texture and find the exact same thing online. Don't tempt me, or don't test me. I've been pretty good at this. It is your responsibility to source your own photo textures. Again, if you don't have a textures.com account, I recommend it. You can adjust the color and some of the particulars of the elements of the texture, such as color or how the paint is worn. So I'm not looking for a reproduction. By all means, you can do one. If you want to stretch, I know that someone in Section 1 did a Hello Kitty A-Wing. Works for me. I had someone else do a... not Section 1. Section 2. The section you guys are not. So one person did Hello Kitty. Another person did a an American flag themed A-Wing. And then for their logo, they had that meme of Bernie with his mitts on. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I laughed. I originally opened the file and I thought that was Optimus Prime because red, white, and blue. And then I looked at the tail fin and I was like, oh, nope, never mind. Meme. But yeah, again, you guys have some creative freedom on this. What I'll be grading you on is that whether or not the model is cleanly unwrapped with little to no distortion on all of your shells. Your diffuse texture mimics the structure and details of the reference. So start looking for your hard edges. Hide your seams where they occur with some wear and tear most likely. And the details up from the reference images. So grates, raised paneling. So I've done both of these. I've done stripes. Card numbers I didn't do, but I did do a demonstration as to exactly what can go wrong with them. And it actually says Blue Falcon down the sides. This time I'll also be looking at your shell scaling. So with the A-Wing, I wasn't too strict on, is this correctly scaled? Is this comparatively scaled to the rest of the shells? As long as you didn't have too much empty UV space, I was fine with it. Now I'm actually going to start cracking down on it. So once your feedback goes live, make sure that you incorporate any notes I have regarding UV space usage. When I mark you down on something, I'll tell you what it is, and then I'll tell you how to fix it. Hence another reason why I'm doing audio. Because when I was typing this stuff, one section took me about 5 hours, and I've got 4 sections, so yeah. So my apologies for my lack of enunciation. If you do have any questions regarding the audio feedback, by all means, fire me an email, ask for clarification. But what you're submitting to me is bluefalcon.max. Sorry, last name, first name, bluefalcon.max. Make sure that is the file that you unwrapped. And then last first diffuse.png. That's the diffuse texture that you submitted. Small aside on that, and actually I can test this or check this real quick. Data, give me 1 second. Crap. Temp folder, grading folder, A-Wing, section 1. So actually your section had less issues with submission formatting. I had a couple people in section 2 that did not submit their diffuse textures for the A-wing. So all I had to grade was the actual unwrap, and they lost a substantial chunk of marks for it. One thing that was a little more consistent with your section, or with you guys, is that people aren't putting stuff into folders. Or this, I was doing some retop a while ago. So because you didn't put stuff into folders, when I extracted all of your submissions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people didn't put it into folders, it all dumped into the root directory, and so I had 22 free floating files, and some of them overwrote one another. So I had to go back, re-extract those submissions, make sure that I wasn't confusing one texture for the other or one submission for someone else's. Don't do it. You will lose mark. Sorry. Right now in texture 1, if you don't give me the correct submission format, you just won't get as many marks as you could have otherwise. So file submission and followed instructions. So whereas you could get up to 15% if you don't have it in a folder, if your files aren't named correctly, maybe you'll get a 11 or a 10 out of 15. In the future, and I'll let you guys know when this happens well in advance, in the future, if you do not follow the submission formatting, so if I say no PSDs, you give me a PSD. If I say, give me these 4 files and you give me a, series of 8, in the future, if you do that, it's not that you won't gain those marks, you will lose marks. So if you nailed your unwrap, nailed your texture, it's beautiful, it's immaculate, but you screwed up the submission on the submission formatting, that 100% will drop to 90, that sort of thing. So rather than gaining marks for doing it correctly, you'll lose marks off the overall grade for not doing it correctly. So please, especially with the modeling assignment, please make sure your format's correct. I guess you joined us a little late, apologies. Your A-wing assignment marks will be up tonight. Section 2 has theirs, and I'll get yours tonight. I've just been a little under the weather recently. So, I'm going to segue into a demonstration. No worries, apologies. I'm just pointing it out so that when you read back the stream, or if you watch back the stream, I probably went into a little bit more depth with the explanation. So it's more for your reference. Don't worry about, no apology needed. So I'm going to go a little deeper into this because this is going to lead us directly into what we will be doing in class next week. So I already established that in a diffuse texture, you're presumably adding in light and shadow to increase the appearance of three-dimensionality or interior form on an object without using geometry. I also emphasized setting up your texture so that it's using multiple layers, ideally setting up a new layer each time you're doing a new aspect or a new color on the object. So I've got a layer where it's just my bare metal for those chipped areas. I've got a separate layer entirely for my, added paneling. Realistically, they should be on separate layers, this one versus this one, so I could affect or change the light separately. All my colors are on their own layers. This is the reason why I'm telling you to do this. So again, you guys don't need to do this for this homework. if you want to practice with what I'm about to do, go nuts. So, in order to control where light hits an object and how it hits it, the AO we'll do next week, but we'll combine it with this. So I've got a lot of bare metal showing. So it's all these little creased pieces, or all these little chipped pieces rather. If it's bare metal, you can probably make an easy argument that as the two pieces of metal rub together, that abrasion reduces the roughness of the two surfaces. So it ends up easy terms, it means that it's smooth. Smooth means shiny. So I'm going to go on to a new layer. Because I have all this masked out, I can control click the mask. Now all those metal sections are selected. New layer. And flood it white. This is my metal highlights. Anywhere that I don't want to be shiny, so let's say for example the yellow paint that they used is a really matte finish. So going to yellow, I'll control click the mask, control click all of them. Sorry, control shift click all of them. It allows me to select them very quickly and easily. No, Mika. Oh. New layer. Call it matte paint highlights. Since it's matte paint, it's probably not very shiny. I'm going to flood it dark gray. Everything else I'm going to assume is kind of shiny, 50-50-ish. I'll just call this everything else. So basically what I've done is I've said that these shells, so the paint, the yellow paint I should say, all those areas are not very shiny at all. The majority of the texture is kind of shiny. And the white area, the metallic areas or the bare metal areas are very shiny. So I'm just using the colors from black to white to say anything colored black is not shiny, anything colored white is. Give me one second, I'm just going to change the canopy to bright. Oops. And I'm going to save this as a texture. So this is Wild Goose, and what I'm about to do is I'm about to control the specularity, or how specular highlights appear on this object. So inside of Max, I've already got my diffuse texture. I'm just going to set it over to standard for the time being, or back to standard, because it's a lot easier to deal with than physical material. So there's my Wild Goose diffuse. Drop it in the diffuse slot. I'm going to go to its specular level. So if you guys have ever played with this, you'll have noticed that as you increase that value, the object gets shiny. As you decrease it, it gets dull. That's what that map is doing, or that texture is doing. So there's my Wild Goose specular. And I grabbed the wrong one, although it does still work, kind of. So now as I rotate around, not much of a highlight or specular highlight on any of the yellow areas. Quite a bit of highlight on those bare metal and the canopy. Look how bright that is. It's overexposed. Now when I bring in an omni light or any directional light source, too high. As I move it around, I don't have to worry about whether or not I place that highlight in the correct place. So that's why I said be subtle. I'm gonna get an actual highlight. So there's the metal or the exposed bare metal. As I move the light off, it's just highlight information, just specular information. So you can see this even more clearly. I'm gonna actually turn off the diffuse. All you're seeing at this point is the specular information. So this area is really dull versus the area around it, which is a little shinier. This area is a little shinier than the paint, but this area is as shiny as you're going to get on the material. Same with the canopy. So you're not seeing color information right now. You're only seeing specular information. That's what we'll be starting with next week. You don't need it for the F-Zero project, but I will be doing this with you in the coming 2 weeks. Sorry, next week and after the midterm. If I had hand painted all of this into a single layer, hand painted this all into a single layer, good luck chopping that up. It's possible, don't get me wrong. It's completely doable. It's just going to take you forever and a day in order to do it. Because you have to go with color selection, either magic wand or whatever. Again, doable, but you end up redoing a lot of your work. So keep that in mind. Having a black and white black and white texture, or black to white texture, that will drive or correspond to shiny, not shiny. Because that's what we're going to use it next week. So you guys are measurably chattier than section 2. That's not a complaint, it's an observation. So this class actually ran exactly on time for the most part. I went a little long at the start with talking about the unwrap of the pendant and whatnot, but yeah, this is exactly where I want to be at 2:44. And as soon as I say you guys are chattier, everyone's quiet. Yep. And you guys will be doing it by the end of term. Sorry, next class you will be doing it, but you're going to be making... but you'll be doing a full object with this material by the end. Yep. Just as an aside, so right now I'm using standard legacy. So this specular map that I've made, again, white says lots of highlight, black means no highlight or very little. Just to clarify a term that Dan used inside of the texturing feedback channel inside of Discord, he mentioned when you guys get into PBR, avoid it there as well. Avoid full black, avoid full white. PBR, physically based rendering, is one of the workflows, or not just workflow. It refers to calculating the proper bounce energy of light, not you, but your engine correctly calculating the bounce energy of light. So who was it that was saying it? Carrington was saying about if white light hits a red object, bounces off and hits a white object, it's going to actually project a little bit of red onto that white surface. That in computer graphics is referred to global illumination. That's the calculation that's one of the calculations from physically based rendering. It's mimicking what happens in real life. We'll start with one of the PBR maps next week, ambient occlusion. There's two forms or two workflows for PBR. One is metal roughness, one is spec gloss. For the time being, this is grossly oversimplified, but for the time being, the distinction that you can associate them with is, number one, Max has both PBR metal rough, PBR spec gloss. So spec gloss is basically a physically based render mode of a standard material. You've got diffuse, spec color, spec level, gloss level, self-illum or emissive, opacity. Got all of that here. Metal roughness, the only thing that really changes is on a specular map, so what I just made. White means shiny, or the lighter it is, the shinier it is. The darker it is, the less shiny it is. Metal rough is just the opposite. So if this was my specularity map, sorry, Control Shift C, V, that's my roughness map. And don't worry, I will get into this more as we go. So this is now roughness. Save. Yep. So I can go into that PBR metal rough, set it to black, go into my roughness, bitmap. Roughness. And there it is. Same idea. I'll just hook up a SNG map as well, or an SNG shader. And that's just my abbreviation. It's either MNR, metal rough, or SNG, spec and gloss. There is another value in there that needs to be changed or adjusted, but that's something that you guys can worry about later on. Or it will be introduced to you later on. Take that back down. Same map. It's just been inverted. So that be it. I'll let the stream run out till 3 o'clock on the dot. If you guys have any questions, ask either, in the Twitch chat, in Discord, your call. And Which version of Photoshop are you installing? I mean, like, what year release? Because right now I updated over the weekend too, so I'm at 22.1.1, and I've been noticing some stability issues as well as some file handling issues. So this drive should have 50 gigs free, and I'm missing 20. And the oh, okay. Yeah, I've noticed some display performance issues as well, but also with the file handling, that would be on your HDD or your SD, depending on what your system's set to. Okay. Yeah. I don't know about digital drawing, but I know for texturing you could get away with using like an earlier year's iteration of Photoshop. Like you could actually go into Creative Cloud Controller and install an actual older version of it, and you won't lose out on anything. Not for texturing anyway. Mm-hmm. Should be. Yeah, she's hungry. She's Mika, come here. Come here. Yeah, say hi to your audience. Here. Yeah, she's Tiger Stripe. Nice. Yeah. She just wants food. Surprise. Mm-hmm. To her credit, she does sleep on my feet at night. So, yeah, she's definitely using me for purveyor of food, but at the same time, at least I get a little something out of it. Nice. Unless you have cat allergies, in which case, not so nice. Yeah, I grew out of my pet dander allergies too. Otherwise, she'd drive me crazier than she already does. You mean like get feedback by posting inside of the feedback Discord, or? Oh yeah, absolutely. Section 2 already did that a couple times. Yep. What the heck did I do? Oops. Yep. My computer just decided that's going to kick into warp drive. Yeah. Luckily, recently bought compressed air. I need to do some cleaning this weekend. I haven't properly animated something in a very long time. My animation skills are probably still based in Maya. Like, I know the translation, but yeah. I'm gonna go take care of the whiner. Yep. So I'll take care of her. Then I'll have a cigarette. If you want feedback or whatnot, have questions, fire me a Discord message, and I'll get back to you when I'm back. But yeah, this is just open office hours. So if I don't see you guys in Discord, I will see you next week.